The Watsons by Jane Austen, Part 13. But unluckily she had left the pleasure of providing for you to your father, and without the power. That's the long and the short of the business. After keeping you at a distance from your family for such a length of time as must do away all natural affection among us, and breeding you up, I suppose, in a superior style, you are returned upon their hands without a sixpence. "You know," replied Emma, struggling with her tears, "my uncle's melancholy state of health. He was a greater invalid than my father. He could not leave home." "I do not mean to make you cry," said Robert, rather softened, and after a short silence, by way of changing the subject, he added, "I am just come from my father's room. He seems very indifferent. It will be a sad break-up when he dies. Pity you can none of you get married. You must come to Croydon as well as the rest and see what you can do there. I believe if Margaret had had 1,000 or 1,500 pounds, there was a young man who would have thought of her." Emma was glad when they were joined by the others. It was better to look at her sister-in-law's finery than listen to Robert, who had equally irritated and grieved her. Mrs. Roberts, exactly as smart as she had been at her own party, came in with apologies for her dress. "I would not make you wait," said she, "so I put on the first thing I met with. I am afraid I am such a sad figure. My dear Mr. Watson," to her husband, "you have not put any fresh powder in your hair." "No, I do not intend it. I think there is powder enough in my hair for my wife and sisters." "Indeed, you ought to make some alteration to your dress before dinner when you are not out visiting, though you do not at home." "Nonsense." "It's very odd you should not like to do what other gentlemen do. Mr. Marshall and Mr. Hemmings change their dress every day of their lives before dinner. And what was the use of my putting up your last new coat if you were never to wear it?" "Do be satisfied with being fine yourself and leave your husband alone." To put an end to this altercation and soften the evident vexation of her sister-in-law, Emma, though in no spirits to make such nonsense easy, began to admire her gown. It produced immediate complacency. "Do you like it?" said she. "I am very happy. It has been excessively admired, but I sometimes think the pattern too large. I shall wear one tomorrow that I think you will prefer to this. Have you seen the one I gave Margaret?" Dinner came, and except when Mrs. Roberts looked at her husband's head, she continued gay and flippant, chiding Elizabeth for the profusion on the table and absolutely protesting against the entrance of the roast turkey, which formed the only exception to "You see your dinner. I do beg and entreat that no turkey may be seen to-day. I am really frightened out of my wits with the number of dishes we have already. Let us have no turkey, I beseech you." "My dear," replied Elizabeth, "the turkey is roasted, and it may just as well come in as stay in the kitchen. Besides, if it is cut, I am in hopes my father may be tempted to eat a bit, for it is rather a favourite dish." "You may have it, my dear, but I assure you I shan't touch it." Mr. Watson had not been well enough to join the party at dinner, but was prevailed on to come down and drink tea with them. "I wish we may be able to have a game of cards to-night," said Elizabeth to Mrs. Robert after seeing her father comfortably seated in his armchair. "Not on my account, my dear, I beg. You know I am no card player. I think a snug chat infinitely better. I always say cards are very well sometimes to break a formal circle, but no one ever wants them amongst friends." "I was thinking it's being something to amuse my father," answered Elizabeth. If it was not disagreeable to you. He says his head won't bear whist, but perhaps we make a round game. He may be tempted to sit down with us." By all means, my dear creature, I am quite at your service, only do not oblige me to choose the game, that's all. Speculation is the only round game at Croydon now, but I can play anything. When there is only one or two of you at home, you must be quite at a loss to amuse him. Why do you not get him to play at cribbage? Margaret and I have played at cribbage most nights that we have not been engaged. A sound like a distant carriage was at this moment caught. Everybody listened. It became more decided. It certainly drew nearer. It was an unusual sound at Stanton at any time of the day, for the village was on no public road and contained no gentleman's family but the rector's. The wheels rapidly approached. In 2 minutes the general expectation was answered. They stopped beyond a doubt at the garden gate of the parsonage. Who could it be? It was certainly a post-chaise. Penelope was the only creature to be thought of. She might perhaps have met with some unexpected opportunity of returning. A pause of suspense ensued. Steps were distinguished, first along the paved footway which led under the windows of the house to the front door, and then within the passage. They were the steps of a man. It could not be Penelope. It must be Samuel. The door opened and displayed Tom Musgrave in the wrap of a traveller. He had been in London and was now on his way home, and he had come 1/2 a mile out of his road merely to call for 10 minutes at Stanton. He loved to take people by surprise with sudden visits at extraordinary seasons, and in the present instance had the additional motive of being able to tell the Miss Watsons, whom he depended on finding sitting quietly employed after tea, that he was going home to an 8 o'clock dinner. As it happened, however, he did not give more surprise than he received, when instead of being shown into the usual little sitting-room, the door of the best parlour, a foot larger each way than the other, was thrown open, and he beheld a circle of smart people whom he could not immediately recognise, arranged with all the honours of visiting round the fire, and Miss Watson sitting at the best Pembroke table, with the best tea-things before her. He stood for a few minutes in silent amazement. "Musgrave!" ejaculated Margaret in a tender voice. He recollected himself and came forward, delighted to find such a circle of friends, and blessing his good fortune for the unlooked-for indulgence. He shook the hands with Robert, bowed and smiled to the ladies, and did everything very prettily. But as to any particularity of address or emotion towards Margaret, Emma, who closely observed him, perceived nothing that did not justify Elizabeth's opinions, though Margaret's modest smiles imported that she meant to take the visit to herself. End of part 13.